Hi guys, my name's Kat, and today I'm going to be discussing the appeal to the stone fallacy and understanding the role that this fallacy plays in society and how it can help us avoid being misled. So, we encounter arguments and debates in our daily lives, whether we're at work or at school or at home with friends and family, and typically we would expect those arguments to be based on logic and evidence. And when they're not, it can be damaging to everyone that's involved. So imagine spending hours doing research for a debate or a topic, and you have ample evidence and data that supports your argument, and then all to be dismissed by someone who brushes it off and simply says, that's nonsense or that's absurd. That would be pretty frustrating, I would imagine, and that's essentially what this fallacy is. So today I'm going to define what appeal to the stone fallacy is and discuss its origins, some examples, and talk about how we can learn to recognize this and avoid it. So let's start by defining what exactly appeal to the stone fallacy is. It essentially occurs when a person dismisses their opponent's arguments based on absurdity or calling it absurd without actually addressing the content of the argument. So they do this without providing sufficient evidence in order to prove its absurdity. They simply brush it off, and there is little to no reasoning behind the dismissal. So it originates from an argument between Dr. Samuel Johnson and James Boswell, and they were arguing over the theory of subjective idealism, and Johnson essentially walked away from the argument and kicked a large stone and said, "I refute it thus." So that's kind of where this comes from. Now that we understand a little bit more about it, let's look at some real life examples because it actually happens more often than you would think. And many political debates actually feature the appeal to the stone fallacy. When a politician or a presidential candidate might dismiss an opponent's policy proposal or their policy in general and call it ridiculous without providing any counter arguments. And when an argument is made with true evidence that backs it up and is brushed off to be fake news or absurd, there's no further elaboration or rebuttal with facts and information. And this was actually seen a lot at the start of the pandemic when scientists or epidemiologists were warning the public and public officials about reopening schools and businesses or mask policies or vaccine recommendations and making other suggestions that were based on scientific evidence. And these were people who had dedicated their entire lives to research and diseases, and they were simply dismissed or called names, etc., by people who just didn't agree with them or did not support masks and vaccines. And this fallacy makes it really difficult for the initial argument to be perceived as credible. So it places the burden on the person who made the initial statement to then prove it's correct. So how can we recognize when this fallacy is being used? You're going to want to look for statements or arguments that dismiss an argument without addressing their substance. So if someone calls something ridiculous or absurd or fake news, ask them for specific reasoning and evidence or facts that clarify what exactly about the initial statement is false, or even ask them to clarify where the disconnect is, or potentially provide their own evidence and data that supports their claims and opposes the initial statements. So, in conclusion, understanding the appeal to the stone fallacy is crucial for fostering constructive and reasoned discussions that are based on truth and facts. And by understanding this topic and avoiding this fallacy, we can engage in a more meaningful and productive argument. And next time you hear someone dismiss an argument as false or nonsense, just remember to use critical thinking and seek that meaningful evidence. And with this in mind, we can strive to have more constructive discourse that encourages all sides to do their research and have sufficient evidence that backs up their claims. And then if someone does disagree with the claims or statements or anything, then we would hope that they also had done their research and they had their own evidence and information that will back up their side rather than just dismissing it. Thank you.